When did it all go wrong? Why did Arabs and Jews start hating each other? Is it because of Judaism? Is it because of Islam? Is it about oil, money? Unlikely, as for over 1,300 years, since the very beginning of Islam, Jews and Muslims lived together in an unprecedented religious and cultural harmony in Palestine, North Africa, and Spain. It all seemed to be going just fine till the 20th century. But then something happened. And ever since, Jews and Arabs had been at each other's throats. The little picturesque town of Basel, in Switzerland, have possibly something to do with how it all went wrong. Basel was the setting for the first Zionist convention in 1897. Zionism was a national Jewish revival movement that sought to unite all Jews in a national homeland. In Basel, however, the Zionist movement decided on an ideal and historically relevant location: Palestine. But what if the people who were already living in Palestine didn't want to have a national Jewish home set up in their country? The Zionists had some clear ideas about that problem from the very beginning. Theodor Herzl, considered to be the founder of Zionism, wrote in 1895, "We shall try to spirit away the penniless population across the border." Leo Motzkin, one of Zionism's most liberal thinkers, wrote, "The colonization of Palestine has to go in two directions: Jewish settlements in Eretz Israel, and the resettlement of Arabs in areas outside the country." Chaim Weizmann, the head of the World Zionist Congress and future president of Israel, proclaimed the Palestinians to be the rocks of Judea, obstacles that need to be cleared on a difficult path. Amazing how little have changed since then.
The Jewish people came into this country, said this is our country, and they didn't say it's our country, but we recognize that there's another people living here. Let's see what we can work out. No, the whole idea of Israel until today is this is our country from the Mediterranean to the Jordan River, and it's only our country. It's exclusively our country. There is no other people. There's a bunch of Arabs living here, that we know, but there's no people. There's no other people with a claim to the country, with a legitimate right to the country. This is our country exclusively, and therefore, either you shut up if you're a Palestinian, and you live in one of the little islands we'll give you, by sufferance, not by right, or get out.
But back to the story. At the end of the 19th century, there were hardly any Jews living in Palestine. So the Zionists started campaigning all over the world for Jews to immigrate to Palestine. The Zionists also launched Operation Buy a State. They went and bought all the land they could from Palestinian absentee landlords. Once the land was theirs, they threw out all the Palestinians that were living on it. The Zionists called this process Judifying the land and land redemption. Then, in 1917, things changed. The British conquered Palestine from the Turks. They legalized the Jewish national home idea with the Balfour Declaration in the same year.
Palestine became a special case because the British violated the provisions of the Mandate for Palestine, because they put the Balfour Declaration into the Palestine Mandate, you say. What did this mean? It meant that for Palestine, the wishes of the inhabitants, 90% Arab, would not be listened to, and they would not be developed for independence. It would be Jews, once they came in through immigration, you see, they would be allowed to develop. And so it's really with the Palestinian Mandate and the violation of the mandatory provisions to give the Zionists the right to create a majority of Jews to create a Palestinian state, that the real Palestinian Zionist conflict begins, with very few illusions on both sides.
The Palestinians launched two popular uprisings against the Jews and the British blatant pro-Zionist policies. The first took place in 1929 and claimed hundreds of Palestinians and Jewish lives. The second, in 1936, was practically a small-scale war between the Palestinians and the British, who were also aided by the Zionists. It lasted for 3 years, and in the end, approximately 5,000 Palestinians died. The British also exiled the Palestinians' leadership and dismantled all Palestinians' paramilitary units. The Palestinians were left defenseless and leaderless. Then, in the 1940s, the cards turned. Following a string of British pro-Palestinian policies, the Zionists launched terrorist attacks on British personnel and facilities.
Violence continues to rule in Palestine. British soldiers seek bodies in the Department of Labor building at Chechnik, where a few minutes before, a blast had partially wrecked the edifice. 3 policemen were blown to bits when they tried to remove an explosive-laden truck. Shaky walls are torn down. After a bomb explosion caused by terrorists on the British headquarters at Jerusalem, one entire corner of the King David Hotel, a building of 7 stories, was razed to the ground. The stone floors were cut.
88 innocent people died, and a good deal of the British High Command was wiped out. Their goal was to drive the British out of Palestine. The mastermind of the King David bombing was Menachem Begin. He would become Israel's Prime Minister. His accomplice, Yitzhak Shamir, would also later become Prime Minister. At this point, the British have had enough, and they transferred the matter of Palestine to the UN.
the United Nations sent a committee to evaluate this in the summer of 47, and they recommended partition. And the Zionists eagerly accepted this, and the Palestinian Arabs didn't because they were still 2/3 of the population, and they felt this was unjust. But nonetheless, this partition, which was approved in the UN after Thanksgiving in 1947, officially recognized two states.
In 1947, the Jews owned 5.8% of the land. In the UN partition plan, the Jews ended up with 56% of the land, almost 10 times of what they actually owned. The Palestinians had half of their land stolen right under their noses. Their population was split into two, half of it living in the Zionist state as a minority. This amount of land, more than half of Palestine, was still not enough for the Zionists. David Ben-Gurion, the leader of the Zionist movement in Palestine, wrote in 1937, "The Arabs will have to go. But one needs an opportune moment for making it happen, such as a war." Towards the end of 1947, the Zionist leadership came together and drew Plan Dalet. Plan Dalet was about securing the borders of Israel by cleansing, expelling, and destroying Palestinian towns, villages, and urban neighborhoods. The plan was implemented by the Zionist armed forces.
And finally, in March, they began a push to ensure their control of areas that would become Israel under the partition. And as that happened, you began to get many more Palestinian Arabs fleeing, particularly after a massacre at a place called Deir Yassin, although people now think it was probably somewhat over 100, but not 200. But Begin and the Irgun and the Stern gang, Yitzhak Shamir was part of that. There was a combined attack in this Palestinian village that massacred many people. And the Palestinians did carry out a retaliatory raid, killing about 70 Jewish doctors on the road to Jerusalem shortly thereafter. But after that, you had mobile radio vans that Begin put into play, threatening more Deir Yassins if the Arabs didn't flee. In other words, you'll be massacred just like Deir Yassin. So it became part of the propaganda.
Between the 30th of March and 15th of May, 1948, 200 villages were occupied and their inhabitants expelled. In some villages, such as Deir Yassin and Ain al-Zaytun, horrible massacres were perpetrated. The towns of Tiberias, Haifa, Tzfat, Beisan, Jaffa, and Accra fell into Zionist hands. As a result, more than 250,000 Palestinians were expelled. All of this took place before the 1948 war even started, before one regular Arab soldier set his foot on Palestinian soil. It is important to note that during that time, the British had almost 70,000 troops in Palestine. Their mandate, which lasted until the 15th of May, 1948, was to maintain law and order and to protect civilians. they failed miserably in that obligation. In February 1948, Ben-Gurion wrote to his foreign minister, "We will be able not only to defend, but also to take over Palestine as a whole. I am in no doubt of this. We can face all the Arab forces." Confident of their victory, the Zionists declared independence on the 14th of May, 1948. And Ben-Gurion became the first prime minister. On the 15th of May, 1948, 7 Arab countries declared war on Israel and invaded Palestine. In a joint public statement, they explained their reasons. The Zionist aggression in Palestine resulted in the exodus of more than 250,000 of its Arab inhabitants, and in their taking refuge in the neighboring Arab countries. While the war was going on, the Zionists increased their ethnic cleansing operations. Villagers were expelled en masse, and massacres occurred in many places. The villages of Hula, Saliyah, and Bassa were but a few to suffer such atrocities during 1948. Once Zionist troops occupied a village that resisted them, they would round up all the men according to lists the intelligence officers would provide. On the whim of the local commander, they would either shoot them or march them away. The biggest expulsion and massacre happened in the city of Lid Ramle. 50,000 people were expelled from the city in a single day. 426 men, women, and children were killed by the Zionist forces. The general in charge of the occupation and expulsion of Lid Ramle was Yitzhak Rabin, who would later become Israel Prime Minister, serving 2 terms. In 1948, the Chicago Sunday Times reported on the Israeli tactics. Practically everything in their way died. Riddled corpses lay by the side of the roads. The New York Herald Tribune wrote, "The corpses of Arab men, women, and even children strewn about in the wake of the ruthlessly brilliant charge." The London Economist reported, "The Arab refugees were systematically stripped of all of their belongings. Then, they were sent on their trek to the frontier.